Hi, good day, everyone. So we are now in the section 7. As we listen with the previous six presenter, we are now actually in the section 7. So we'll be learning about the population and sampling. By the way, my name is Denzohar Mahilom. So I will be tackling the different learning objectives within this section. So we have actually 9 learning objectives. To begin with, to define the population and sampling. Next, distinguish between finite and infinite population. Next, differentiate topics, respondents, target, sampling, and sampling population. Fourth, to identify the relevant population for a research study. Fifth, define sampling and sampling frame. Six, recognize the type of population in hypothetical studies. Seventh, justify the need for sampling. Eight, explain various sampling designs and techniques. And lastly, the ninth, to decide the appropriate sample size for a research study. So, without further ado, let's start with defining what is really a population. So, in research, especially in educational research, a population refers to a set of individuals or entities that share common characteristics. For instances, all grade 10 or all grade 9 students or grade 8 students in Metro Manila can be a population if we're studying academic performance of secondary learners within Metro Manila. It's important to emphasize that a population is not limited to people. It could be classrooms, schools, textbooks, events like science fairs, or even behavioral types. So this is not limited to people only. The clarity in defining a population ensures we don't misalign our sampling method, which is um, very important when we will going to conduct our research. Now, let's differentiate between the four types of population in research. We have first the topic population. This is your broad conceptual group. Let's say, for example, all public school teachers in the Philippines. So that is your topic population. Second, respondent population. These are those who can actually provide data. So this refers to those who will actually answer your surveys or participate in your studies, since not all, for example, public school teachers can answer your study. So you need to have a respondent population to get your data. We also have this target population. This is the group you wish to make inferences about, since they match your inclusion criteria. So from the word itself, target, these are the ideal groups intended for your study. So in some cases, you need to have your criteria in order for the data you'll gather to be valid. So if the population falls within the criteria, then that is considered your target population. And lastly, you have sampling population. This is who you can realistically reach. So not all of the times your target population are reachable. So this is due to time or limited resources. Not all of us are having a lot of time to conduct our research, and we have limited money to use. So this is a smaller subset of the target population. It is called sampling population. Now, what is a sampling? Since it is very important in research, we need to know what is a sampling. So sampling is fundamental in research because we rarely have the capacity to study every single individual in the population, especially if we're talking thousands, millions, or even billions of people. According to Cooper and Emery, sampling reduces cost and increases efficiency. Especially, it is important for researchers like us who has limited time and resources. So we need to have a good sampling technique. By selecting a well-chosen sample, we can draw conclusions about the whole group. So even though they are small in numbers, but those data we can actually collect from that certain group of sample concludes about the whole group. So the uh, they provide enough data to represent the whole group, provided that the technique we use in sampling is right. We need to know the sampling terms. We have actually four sampling five sampling terms here. The sample, sampling frame, sampling unit, sample statistics, and population parameter. The sample is the group you'll actually collect data from. So that is, I already discussed that a while ago. On the other hand, the sampling frame is the actual list or method you use to pick the sample, such as class roster or school directory. You could also use attendance sheets or any actual list or method to pick your sample that is considered your sampling frame. You also have this sampling unit. This is the element or case selected, for example, student or a classroom. It could be an individual like a student or a cluster like an entire school or a smaller cluster, for example, uh, class section in per grade level. So that could be used as your sampling unit. We use sampling statistics to estimate the population parameter. So when when defining your population parameter, you need to know the sampling statistics as it estimates your population based on the sample. So that's it. You need to actually know the population first, then you need to know uh, you need to have a sample in order for you to estimate your participants of your study. So that is called sampling statistics. Now let's go with the type of population in research. You have target population, accessible population, respondent population, and sampling population. So the target population is your ideal group to study. But again, due to limitations, we often work with the accessible population. So it is much more ideal to have this target population, but sad to say, we cannot at all times can get data from the target population. So we will have to gather our data within this accessible population. This is actually still part of target population, but those who are reachable. So the portion of the target population that is available to the researchers. So they are near to you. You can actually um, you can actually spend just a short resources to gather information about them. From here, from the accessible population, we can now define the sampling population, which is usually a formalist or a sampling frame. So from accessible population, you need to have your own list of your individual to to be your respondent. So that is respondent population, the actual individual who who will respond or who responded from your study. And eventually you can the respondent population refers to those who participate. And from that your sampling population is now set. So these are the list from which example is drawn. So that's it. So we're now be moving forward to comparing definite versus infinite population. So I know you're already familiar with this, so I will not explain this further. A finite population has clear boundaries. So finite clear boundaries, while infinite population are those we can't reasonably count. So this is the population where the numbers could be impossible to count. So that's finite versus infinite population. So sampling, we already discussed this in the key terms in the sampling. So that's sampling frame. Examples below are, for example, the population are all senior high school students in NCR, while your sampling frame are again the list of where you can get a list of all senior high school students in NCR. This could be from enrollment records or from DepEd NCR mismo. Now, rationale for sampling. Why need sampling? Again, this will reduce cost, greater speed for data collection and analysis since um, when you do sampling, uh, you can identify uh, the actual respondents of your study. Therefore, you can gather it within the fastest time you can. So, greater scope. This enables study for broader and distant population. So, by doing sampling, you can actually uh, choose the participant within your you can actually choose your participant within your target population. So again, um, it provides greater accuracy. So a more detailed data with proper design since you planned it ahead, you know already your target population. So there is greater accuracy within the data you will be gathering later. Now, let us talk with the types of sampling techniques. So, these sure are all familiar to you. So, we'll just be uh, giving some easy insights on this. The two main categories of sampling we have probability sampling and non-probability sampling. When you say probability sampling, every element in the population has a known chance of being the participants of or being the respondents, usually based on random selection. So probability sampling is more preferably used if you want to have a quantitative study since it generalizes the data from the whole population. On the other hand, the non-probability sampling does not offer equal chances. Rather, participants are selected based on variability, purpose, or judgment. So not all members have known chance of inclusion. So picking ang tirada here in the non-probability sampling, or if you have criteria, can also use criteria to select participants in non-probability sampling. So often it was used or it is used when you are going to have qualitative study or exploratory research. Let's talk with the different types of probability sampling. We have here the first SRS or simple random sampling. So in this method, each element in the population has equal and independent chances of being selected. For example, here is the lottery method where in a lottery, there are different sets of numbers in a bowl. So, and the manual drawing of the numbers within a bowl. So that represents the uh, population that will be included in your study. So you can use lottery method. You could also use table of random numbers, computer generated randomization since computers nowadays can randomize numbers. So for example, drawing 10 students out of 100 using an Excel randomizers. You could also use this in lettering method. So you'll be writing 1 to 100 number in a bowl, for example, and you draw 10 possible participants. So each one of them has equal chances of being selected as your participants. So that is simple random sampling. The second type of probability sampling is the systematic sampling. So if you have a list, then you can select every kth element from a list after a random sampling point. For example, if you have 1 to 100 population 100, then you need to get at least 20. So you'll be just dividing the 100 on your target population, which is 20. And if you can get that, that would be fifth. So you can randomly select any number from 1 to 5. For example, if you select, uh, if you can select 3, then you need to start, uh, you need to start counting in, starting in number 3, every fifth person to be your participant. So you have 3 plus 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Your second participants would be 8. Another 5, 13, 13, and then you have from 13, you have 18, you have again 23. So that's how you do systematic sampling. You need to have a list after a random starting point. So of course, you need to have your starting point. You can use this computation. The key is equal to big N over small n. One of the most powerful ways to ensure that all meaningful subgroups in your population are fairly represented is by doing a stratified sampling. This is under still in probability sampling. So population here is divided into subgroups or strata. For example, the grade level, gender, teaching experience. So that's it. You need to start identifying your strata. Next is sample is drawn from each stratum, either proportionally or equally. When you say proportional, in each stratum or each subgroups, you equally get the same number of participants from each subgroups. So it is best used when population is heterogeneous. So when there are mixed characters within population, so this is the best type to use. So under stratified sampling, we have proportional stratified sampling, and we have this proportional stratified sampling. In proportional sampling, sample size reflects the stratum size. For example, when you have 100, uh, 100 a population of 100, and your identified strata is, for example, gender. The gender, the male and female numbers are 40 is to 60, 40 for male and 60 for females. It is not it is not equal when you get, for example, 20 a total of 20 total of 20 respondents from that 100 to have a 10 is to 10 male and female, because the numbers itself of males, the total number itself of males compared to females are not proportional. So you need to get the proportional. So when you're going to get, for example, 20 respondents from that 100, you need to consider getting 40% from the male and 60% from the female. Since only 40 out of 100 are males, then from 20, you can randomly select 8 males and 12 females to be your participants. So that's proportional sampling. On the other hand, this proportional sampling gives equal sample sizes across strata. So whatever the numbers of each strata, again, for example, the 40 is to 60 ratio for males and females, you can directly get randomly selected 10 males and randomly selected 10 females to represent your 20 respondents. So that's disproportional. Disproportional since you are not uh, you are not getting the number of population based on their actual sizes. So in proportional certified sampling, equal proportion from the total populations are being taken into consideration. While in this proportional stratified sampling, as long as there is an equal number in each strata, so that's already your population. You also have here cluster sampling technique under probability sampling. Instead of selecting individuals directly, we select groups or cluster. So this is a typical example of choosing schools as clusters. So you might randomly select 3 schools and survey all the students in each. If your participants would be teachers, then under your divisions, you might randomly select uh, number of schools. For example, if there are 30 schools, then you can randomly select 5 schools that would represent each as a cluster. So that is cluster sampling. The population is divided into clusters. Um, yeah, so it's up to you how you are going to define the cluster in that certain population. But when you group them in cluster and uh, you make all the population under that cluster your participants, then you're now using cluster sampling. So a random sample of cluster is selected. All or some members within chosen clusters are studied. So not all. If the population is small, then you could at least make all the population under each cluster to be your participants. But if it is too broad or too many, then you could just uh, choose some within the chosen cluster. to study. In barangay, you could make each purok to be your cluster. So that is an example. Another probability sampling is the multi-stage sampling. You don't stop at one level, so you go deeper, combining techniques across multiple levels of the population hierarchy. So from the bigger population, you use this type of probability sampling, and then narrowing down to the next level, you use another sampling technique, and going down to your um, final criteria for population, you use another technique. So you are now using multi-stage sampling. So these are a combination of several sampling methods in stages. So that's it. Multi-stage sampling by stages using several sampling methods. So example of this in educational research is one, when you select province randomly, but again, due to limited resources, we can it is ideal to have Bukidnon as our province. Ganun ba to pamunta sa uban when we have the province that will cater our needs in research. So second is when you select schools within this province, you use stratified, for example, stratified or cluster. It's up to you. And third, for example, select students within the school, use systematic. So you use random, stratified, and systematic all in one research, then you use multi-stage sampling. Let's go to the non-probability sampling. Commonly, these are uh, this sampling method uh, will be used when you are going to conduct a qualitative study. So not all elements have known equal chance of being selected. So not all. Often used in qualitative, exploratory, or pilot studies. So types are you have convenience sampling. So when you say convenience sampling, whoever's available. So during the time of the conduct of your qualitative research, for example, um, whoever's available that is convenient to you, and that's the sampling technique you will be using is convenience sampling. You also have this purposive sampling. So under this, participants selected based on specific traits. So your if your criteria for selecting your participants has a specific criteria, then you need to select uh, you need to select the respondents based on those criteria, or else you don't have any participants at all. Or when you select randomly without taking into consideration the specific traits, then the data you will be gathering is not valid and reliable. So that's purposive sampling. Next, we also have quota sampling. So when we say quota sampling, you ensures that proportions without randomness. So you're just from the word itself, quota. You have your quota. For example, you need to interview 10 participants. Then when you get that certain proportions, 10 participants, and you stop without without ensuring the uh, saturation of the data. So as long as the numbers of the respondents are correct, then that's it. You stop data gathering. That's quota sampling. Last one is snowball sampling. So this is usually common when one participants is not available. For example, when you're studying something that is sensitive, you need to use this type of qualitative sampling, snowball, since the participants itself are not available for interviewing uh, because of the sensitivity of the topic, then you need someone or anybody who know or has a background or data for your specific participants, then you can ask someone to for the data you need in that specific participants. So that's snowball sampling. It is only used when the either the population is the participants is not uh, available or the topic itself is too sensitive for the participants to share. So yeah, that's when comparing the two, the probability and non-probability sampling, you can see here the differences based on selection basis, known selection chances, representativeness, generalizability, common uses, and examples. Mm. So that's probability versus non-probability sampling. On the other hand, when you are going to study with regards to behavior, you can use these two sampling techniques. So, under sampling of behavior, we have event sampling and time sampling. These are two different sampling techniques you can use when you are going to study behavior related studies. Event sampling records every occurrence of a specific behavior. So there's no time limit here as long as a specific behavior, for example, students' aggression was being shown, then you need to record its occurrence. So that's event sampling. Each event, for example, students' aggression, um, you should record that specific event. On the other hand, time sampling observes behavior at a set of time intervals. So, event sampling is not time limited, time sampling is time limited. So, you're not into the occurrence of a certain behavior, but what behavior a person behaves within these time intervals. For example, noting attention levels every 5 minutes during classes. So uh, what are the behavior students reflects um, every 5 minutes during a class discussion, for example, that is considered time sampling. So best for continuous or routine behavior since it is time-based or interval-based um, study. So it is best for continuous studies. Aside from traditional sampling methods, the probability and non-probability, sometimes researchers also use specialized techniques for specific contexts. One is random digit dialing, often used in opinion polling. So in this case, phone numbers are generated at random to avoid sampling bias and reach unlisted numbers. So meaning there is no list of numbers, just random dialing of numbers and whatever data you can get from the end line of those phone numbers. So that's it. Random digit dialing. Another is exit polls, where participants are surveyed immediately after an experience, like after voting, attending a training, or attending a seminar. So usually we're more familiar with exit polls since whenever we have trainings in graduate schools, uh, there is there is a survey. So in the form of online survey, we're given time to uh, answer our experiences from that specific trainings or seminars. So that's exit poll. One of the most common question in research planning is how many participants do I need? So that's the most common problems we faced when we do research, the actual number of participants you need in your study. The answer depends on several factors: the total population size, how precise you want your results to be, and how much variability you expect. For quantitative studies, the most common is Slovene's formula, which offers a quick way to calculate sample size, especially when you're dealing with finite numbers or large numbers that is countable but too much to be your participants, then you do Slovene's formula. This method assumes a 95% chance, 95% confidence level, and maximum variability, meaning it gives a conservative estimate, which is safer in planning. So this is the formula of Slovenes, known for known population sizes. Now let's have a quick look for a practical example of a Slovene problem. Imagine a researcher wants to survey a senior high school student from a population of 2,000, for example, and the acceptable margin of error is only 5%. Using Slovene's formula, we can substitute the values e squared is equal to 0.0025 multiplied by 2,000, you get 5. Add 1 to it, then it becomes 6. Then divide the total population by 6. You get approximately 333.333. But we all know that there is no student such point 3. So we always round it round up in sampling. So the final answer is 334. So um, that's your number of participants in 2,000 population. So minimum sample sizes. So not all population uses Sloven's formula. So according to GACE, guidelines for minimum sample sizes, there are a percentage for you to have a acceptable number or sample size. In descriptive research, you can use 10% of population size if the population is small. For correlational study, a minimum of 30 participants. For causal comparative and experimental research, this is in groups, so you need at least 15 participants per groups. In true experimental design, you need to have at least 10 to 15 participants per group. And note that the larger samples improves reliability and statistical power. So you do not want your population to be as low as 10% for descriptive research. As much as possible. You need to have a much higher percentage to have a more reliable and much powerful statistical results later. So, for proportional error estimates, understanding proportional error estimate is um, important for you to have a more acceptable margin of error based on the sample and population sizes. The lesser margin of error, the more confident you will be in your results. Uh, Example for table 6 is when you have 1,000 total population of 1,000, yeah, you need to have a sample of 278 with an estimated error of positive negative 5%. So the smaller samples, the larger the error. So when you have a sample of just um, just a small sample, then uh, the chances of having a large error is high. On the other hand, if you have a larger sample, then the error could be um, smaller. So from that table, um, again, you can see from this table the appropriate sample size of simple random sampling for specific permissions and permission of errors expressed as absolute proportion. So from here you can see the number 100 up to 2 million. You can just get from the table the data or the number need. So from the previous example, you have here 2000, the 1000, which is with 5% uh, error, you just need at least 278 total of population. But when you want a smaller, uh, smaller proportion, proportion of errors, then you need to increase your numbers for 4% in 1000 you can have uh 375 number of participants, and the shorter the error permissible error will be, then the larger your participant should be also. Guidelines for selecting a sample design. So if generalization is the goal, you use probability sampling if you want to represent a group or a population itself. But if it is exploratory, for example, you want to study the lived experiences, a phenomenological study, you use non-probability sampling on the other hand. If population is diverse, use stratified or multi-stage sampling for you to have a more reliable and valid data. If resources are limited, use systematic or cluster sampling. If focusing on hard to reach group, you need to do snowball or purposive sampling for you to gather data even though they're hard to reach. Always align sampling design with your research question, context, and constraint for you to have a more reliable and more validated results after your study. So in summary, and in the form of takeaways, a peer research design ensures logical, valid, and reliable inquiry. Choosing between qualitative and quantitative or even mixed method design depends on your research objectives. So you need to be familiar with your research objectives. Understanding variables, hypotheses, and sampling strengthens methodological alignment. Ethical and strategic sampling is essential for credible findings. So you don't want to uh, don't want to cheat on your process of data gathering. So that is unethical already. So if you want to have a credible findings, you need to be as ethical as possible. A strong foundation in methods enables innovation and critical thinking in research. So that's it. Um, Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from this section, especially when this section is very useful when conducting any research related activities today.